Admiral Jake Peterson stood at the window of Earth Defense Command and watched the 3 alien ships hover above the Pacific Ocean like dark metal clouds. The ships belonged to the Galactic Council, and they had been there for 6 hours now without moving. Jake knew what they wanted, and he knew they expected him to give it to them without a fight. Dr. Lisa Harper rushed into the command center with her tablet in hand and sweat on her forehead. She had been Earth's main contact with the aliens for 15 years, and she still believed they could solve problems by talking. Jake respected her, but he knew better. The aliens did not see humans as equals, and they never would. Lisa stopped beside Jake and pointed at her tablet screen. The message from the Council was short and simple. Humans had 30 days to leave Earth completely. The planet would become a mining site for the Council's use. Any humans who stayed would face what the message called Necessary Force. Commander Ryan Brooks walked up behind them and read the message over Lisa's shoulder. Ryan had worked with Jake for 20 years, and they understood each other without words. Ryan's face showed no surprise at the alien demands. He had been expecting this day since first contact happened. Jake turned away from the window and faced the communication panel. The 3 Council ships were waiting for Earth's answer, and Jake was ready to give it to them. He pressed the transmission button and spoke clearly into the microphone. We decline. The message was short, but it said everything Jake wanted to say. Lisa stared at him with wide eyes and grabbed his arm. She could not believe he had just refused. The most powerful alliance in the galaxy with 2 simple words. Jake, you cannot be serious, she said. These are not like the old Earth governments we used to fight. They have weapons that can destroy entire planets. We need to negotiate with them and find a compromise. Jake looked at Lisa with the patient expression he used when explaining difficult concepts to younger officers. He had seen war in ways that Lisa never had, and he understood that some enemies only respected strength. The Council had made their position clear, and there was no room for compromise in their message. Lisa, there is nothing to negotiate, Jake said quietly. They want our planet, and they want us gone. They think we are too weak to stop them, and they think we will run away scared. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Ryan nodded his agreement and pulled up displays showing Earth's defense systems. Most of the screens showed standard military equipment that any spacefaring civilization would expect to see. Missile batteries and energy weapons, and small patrol ships that looked primitive compared to Council technology. But Ryan touched a hidden panel, and additional screens appeared showing systems the Council had never seen. Jake walked to the central command chair and sat down while Ryan began activating protocols they had hoped never to use. The next few hours would determine whether humanity continued to exist as a free species or became slaves to aliens, who saw them as nothing more than clever animals. Captain Amy Davis appeared on the main communication screen from her ship in orbit. Amy was 28 years old and had been flying spacecraft since she was 16. She commanded the fastest reconnaissance ship in Earth's fleet, and she had been watching the Council vessels since they arrived. Admiral, the Council ships are scanning our cities, Amy reported. They seem to be making lists of human population centers and marking locations for their mining equipment. They really think we are going to pack up and leave. Jake smiled grimly at Amy's report. The Council's confidence would be their first mistake. They had studied humanity for 15 years, but they had only seen what humans wanted them to see. The real preparation had been happening in secret, and the Council had no idea what was coming. Dr. Lisa Harper tried one more time to change Jake's mind about fighting. She pulled up records of every conversation she had ever had with Council representatives and showed Jake their advanced technology and their military victories over other species. The Council had never lost a war, and they had been conquering worlds for thousands of years. Jake, listen to me, please, Lisa said. The Council has destroyed civilizations that were far more advanced than we are. The Kethare had technology we can barely understand, and the Council wiped them out in 6 months. What makes you think we can succeed where they failed? Jake stood up and walked to another window that showed the construction yards where Earth's visible fleet was docked. The ships looked small and fragile compared to the massive Council vessels floating above the ocean. But appearances could be deceiving, and Jake had learned that lesson many times during his military career. The Kethare failed because they fought the Council using Council rules, Jake explained. They tried to match superior technology with superior technology, and they lost. We are not going to make that mistake. Ryan finished entering the activation codes and looked up at Jake with a questioning expression. Everything was ready, but once they began, there would be no turning back. Earth would either win its freedom or face complete destruction within the next few days. Jake looked around the command center at the men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth. They had all known this day might come, and they had all prepared for it in their own ways. The Council expected humans to surrender without fighting, because that was what civilized species did when faced with overwhelming odds. The Council was about to discover that humans were not civilized in the way they understood civilization. Humans were survivors who had climbed to the top of their planet's food chain by refusing to give up when things looked impossible. They had fought wars against each other for thousands of years, and those wars had taught them lessons the Council had never learned. Jake pressed the transmission button again and sent another message to the 3 ships above the Pacific Ocean. This message was longer than the first one, but still simple enough for the Council to understand clearly. You have 15 years of data about humanity, but you do not understand what that data means. You think our wars make us weak, but they make us strong. You think our diversity divides us, but it unites us when we face a common enemy. You are about to learn why Earth has never been conquered by anyone. We are waiting. The Council ships remained motionless above the ocean, but Jake knew the aliens inside were discussing their next move. They had expected surrender, and instead they faced defiance. Soon they would have to decide whether to attack immediately or call for reinforcements from their home worlds. Jake hoped they would choose to attack with just the 3 ships they had brought. Earth was ready for either option, but a smaller engagement would give humanity advantages that a larger battle might not provide. The next 24 hours would determine everything. 15 years earlier, General Paul Mitchell had been the first human to see an alien ship up close. The Council vessel had landed in the Nevada desert, and Mitchell had been chosen to lead the first contact team because of his experience with difficult negotiations. He had expected to meet beings who might become allies or trading partners with Earth. The aliens who emerged from their ship looked like tall, gray lizards wearing elaborate uniforms covered in symbols that meant nothing to humans. Their leader introduced himself as Sub-Commander Kexival and spoke to Mitchell like a teacher addressing a slow student. The alien's words were polite, but his tone made it clear that he considered humans to be primitive creatures who had barely learned to leave their planet. Mitchell had listened carefully to everything Kexival said and had asked questions about Council technology and government and military structure. The alien had answered most questions, but had been vague about details that might have military importance. Mitchell had noticed this evasiveness and had begun to suspect that the Council saw humanity as a potential threat despite their superior attitude. After the first meeting, Mitchell had returned to his base and had called a secret conference with Earth's top military leaders and scientists. He had shared his concerns about the Council's real intentions and had proposed a plan that would prepare humanity for the possibility of future conflict. Most of the people at the meeting had thought Mitchell was being paranoid, but they had agreed to support his preparations. Dr. Nina Roberts had been chosen to lead the scientific side of Mitchell's secret project. Nina was 45 years old and had been studying alien technology since the first Council ship had been detected entering the solar system. She had a team of engineers and physicists who were all experts at reverse engineering complex systems from incomplete information. Nina's team had been given access to every piece of Council technology that humans could legally examine. The aliens had shared some basic equipment with Earth as part of their cultural exchange program, but they had been careful not to provide anything that might threaten their technological advantage. Nina had studied everything the Council had given them and had begun to understand how their systems worked. The breakthrough had come when Nina had realized that Council technology was based on principles that were thousands of years old. The aliens had refined their systems over time, but they had never fundamentally changed their basic approach to engineering. This conservative thinking had made their technology extremely reliable, but it had also made it predictable. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker had been put in charge of the military side of Mitchell's project. Steve was 39 years old and had spent his entire career preparing for wars that might never happen. He had trained special operations teams and had developed tactics for fighting enemies with superior technology. The Council presented challenges he had never faced before, but the basic principles remained the same. Steve's teams had begun training in secret locations around the world and had practiced fighting against mock-ups of Council weapons and vehicles. They had learned to move quickly and strike unexpectedly and disappear before enemies could respond. These tactics had worked against human opponents, and Steve believed they would work against aliens, who thought in rigid patterns. The first major discovery had happened 3 years after first contact, when Nina's team had successfully reverse engineered a Council communication device. The device had contained software that was far more complex than anything humans had created, but it had been written using logical structures that human programmers could understand. Nina had realized that alien software might be vulnerable to viruses designed specifically to exploit its weaknesses. Nina had worked with computer experts from around the world to develop programs that could infiltrate Council systems and cause malfunctions at critical moments. The programs were designed to hide inside normal communications and activate only when they detected specific trigger signals. The Council would never know they had been infected until it was too late to stop the damage. Steve had used this discovery to develop new military strategies that combine traditional combat tactics with cyber warfare techniques. His teams had learned to coordinate physical attacks with electronic infiltration to create maximum confusion among enemy forces. The combination of approaches would force aliens to respond to multiple threats simultaneously and would prevent them from using their technological advantages effectively. General Mitchell had died 5 years ago, but his secret project had continued under the leadership of Admiral Jake Peterson, who had been Mitchell's chosen successor. Jake had expanded the program and had begun building the hidden infrastructure that would support Earth's defense if the Council ever decided to attack. The work had been expensive and difficult, but it had been necessary. The hidden bases had been constructed inside asteroids and on the far side of the moon, where Council surveillance could not detect them. The construction had taken years and had required resources from every major nation on Earth, but the bases were now operational and fully equipped with hybrid human-alien technology that the Council had never seen. Dr. Nina Roberts had led the development of Earth's secret fleet during the 10 years since the first successful reverse engineering project. The ships were built using Council design principles, but they incorporated human innovations that made them faster and more maneuverable than anything the aliens had created. The hybrid vessels could match Council firepower while being much harder to predict and counter. The secret fleet numbered over 300 ships of various sizes and capabilities. The largest vessels were comparable to Council heavy cruisers, but they were designed for hit-and-run tactics rather than direct confrontation. The smaller ships were fighters and reconnaissance vessels that could operate independently or coordinate with larger units to create complex attack patterns. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker had been promoted to colonel and had continued training Earth's special forces throughout the 15 years since first contact. His teams now included men and women who had been children when the aliens first arrived and who had grown up knowing that they might someday have to fight for humanity's survival. These soldiers were better prepared than any human warriors in history. The training programs had expanded to include cyber warfare specialists who could deploy Nina's computer viruses during combat operations. The specialists had practiced infiltrating mock console networks and had learned to identify and exploit the weaknesses that Nina's research had discovered. They could disable alien ships or turn their own weapons against them if the opportunity arose. The most important discovery had been made only 2 years ago when human reconnaissance ships had made contact with survivors of species that the Council had supposedly destroyed. The Kethari had not been wiped out as the Council claimed, but had been driven into hiding in remote star systems, where they had spent centuries rebuilding their strength and planning their return. The Kethari had been suspicious of humans at first, but had eventually agreed to share information about Council military tactics and weaknesses. They had provided detailed intelligence about Council fleet movements and command structures and had revealed that several other supposedly extinct species were also hiding and preparing for eventual revenge against their conquerors. Dr. Lisa Harper had been kept informed about some aspects of the secret preparations, but had not been told about the hidden fleet or the alien alliances. Jake had decided that Lisa's diplomatic work required her to believe genuinely in the possibility of peaceful coexistence with the Council. Her sincere efforts to find compromises had convinced the aliens that humanity posed no serious threat to their interests. Now the 15 years of secret preparation were about to be tested in actual combat against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Everything depended on whether human ingenuity and determination could overcome the Council's technological superiority and numerical advantages. The next few days would prove whether General Mitchell's paranoid preparations had been justified or whether Earth was about to be destroyed by its own overconfidence. Captain Amy Davis launched her fighter squadron from the hidden base on the far side of the moon and headed toward the 3 Council ships that had been waiting above Earth for 18 hours. The alien commanders had finally decided to demonstrate their superior firepower after receiving Jake Peterson's defiant message. Amy knew her small squadron looked pathetic compared to the massive vessels they were approaching. The Council ships were each over 2 kilometers long and carried enough weapons to destroy every city on Earth within minutes. Amy's 12 fighters were tiny by comparison and appeared to be using primitive human technology that should pose no threat to alien defenses. The Council commanders watched the approaching squadron on their displays and discussed whether the humans were attempting suicide or simply demonstrating their hopeless courage. Commander Ryan Brooks piloted the stealth ship HMS Defiance from its hiding place behind Earth's largest space station. The ship was invisible to Council sensors because it used technology that Nina Roberts had developed specifically to avoid detection by alien surveillance systems. Ryan had been waiting for this moment for months and had memorized every detail of the battle plan that he and Jake had created together. Admiral Jake Peterson coordinated the engagement from Earth Defense Command while monitoring communications between the 3 Council ships. The aliens were speaking in their own language, but human computers had been translating Council communications for 15 years. Jake could hear the confidence in their voices as they prepared to destroy what they believed was Earth's entire Space Defense Force. Dr. Lisa Harper watched the tactical displays with growing horror as she realized that Jake was actually going to fight the most powerful military in the galaxy with a handful of outdated ships. She had been trying to contact Council representatives for hours, but they had stopped responding to her diplomatic channels. The time for negotiation had ended, and the shooting was about to begin. Amy's squadron spread into attack formation as they approached the lead council ship. The alien vessel was called the Eternal Dominion, and it carried the sub-commander, who had been sent to oversee humanity's evacuation from Earth. Amy could see weapon ports opening along the ship's hull as the aliens prepared to demonstrate why. Resistance was futile. The first exchange of fire lasted only 30 seconds, but it appeared to prove everything the Council believed about human military capabilities. Amy's squadron fired their missiles and energy weapons at the Eternal Dominion, but the attacks were absorbed by alien shields without causing any visible damage. The Council ship responded with a single blast that vaporized 2 human fighters instantly. The remaining 10 fighters scattered and began evasive maneuvers while the other 2 Council ships moved into positions to support their flagship. The aliens were following standard tactical procedures that had worked successfully against hundreds of other species over thousands of years. They expected the human survivors to retreat or surrender within the next few minutes. Amy led her remaining fighters in what appeared to be a desperate final attack against the second Council ship. The vessel was called the Iron Judgment, and it was commanded by an alien who had personally destroyed 12 rebellious worlds during his long career. He watched the approaching fighters with amusement and prepared to end the brief battle with overwhelming firepower. Commander Ryan Brooks used the distraction created by Amy's attack to move the HMS Defiance into position near the Third Council ship. The vessel was called the Cosmic Authority, and it served as the communication hub for the small fleet. Ryan's ship remained invisible to alien sensors as it approached the command vessel from an unexpected angle. The battle reached its turning point when Amy's squadron suddenly changed tactics and began transmitting data streams toward all 3 Council ships instead of firing weapons. The aliens initially ignored these transmissions because they appeared to be standard human communication protocols that posed no threat to sophisticated alien systems. This assumption proved to be their first fatal mistake. Dr. Nina Roberts had spent years developing computer viruses that could infiltrate Council networks through seemingly harmless data transfers. The viruses were hidden inside normal communication packets and were designed to activate only when they detected specific Council software signatures. The aliens had never encountered anything like these programs because no other species had ever developed them. The viruses began spreading through Council computer networks within seconds of initial contact. They moved quietly through alien systems, while copying themselves and identifying critical control nodes that regulated everything from life support to weapons targeting. The programs were designed to remain dormant until they received activation signals from human controllers. Amy gave the activation command when her remaining fighters were in optimal positions around the 3 Council ships. The viruses suddenly came alive throughout alien computer networks and began executing their primary programming, which was to cause maximum system failures at the worst possible moment for the ship crews. The Eternal Dominion lost main power first, as its primary reactor went into emergency shutdown mode. The ship's artificial gravity failed, and its crew found themselves floating helplessly in zero gravity, while their computers displayed error messages in languages they had never seen. The weapon systems that had seemed so threatening moments earlier were now completely offline. The Iron Judgment suffered cascade failures in its navigation and communication systems, just as it was preparing to destroy Amy's remaining fighters. The ship began spinning slowly as its attitude control thrusters fired randomly, while its main engines shut down automatically to prevent a core breach. The alien commander tried to regain control, but found that his bridge computers no longer responded to any commands. The Cosmic Authority experienced the most devastating failure when its command and control networks became completely corrupted. The ship's central computer began issuing contradictory orders to different systems while displaying false information on all status screens. The crew could not determine which systems were working properly and which were malfunctioning because their diagnostic equipment had also been compromised. Commander Ryan Brooks revealed the HMS Defiance by deactivating its stealth systems and positioning his ship directly between the 3 disabled Council vessels. Ryan opened a communication channel that reached all 3 alien commanders simultaneously and delivered the message that Jake Peterson had prepared for this moment. You came here expecting to fight primitive humans using primitive weapons, but you underestimated what we learned during 15 years of studying your technology. Your ships are now completely under our control, and your crews are helpless. This is your only warning to the Galactic Council that humanity will not surrender its freedom without a fight. The 3 Council ships drifted helplessly in space while their crews tried desperately to regain control of their vessels. The aliens had never experienced computer viruses because their rigid thinking had prevented them from developing such weapons. They had no procedures for dealing with software attacks and no backup systems that could function independently of their main networks. Amy's remaining fighters took positions around the disabled ships, while additional human vessels emerged from hidden locations throughout the solar system. The Council commanders realized they were surrounded by what appeared to be an entire fleet that had been invisible until this moment. Their intelligence about human military capabilities had been completely wrong. Admiral Jake Peterson opened a direct communication channel to the Council home worlds and delivered Earth's response to their ultimatum. The message was broadcast across the galaxy and was heard by every species that had ever been threatened by Council expansion. Humanity had achieved something that no other civilization had accomplished in thousands of years. Dr. Lisa Harper stared at the tactical displays in amazement as she realized that Jake had been planning this victory for years without telling her. The diplomatic efforts she had believed were humanity's only hope had actually been a cover story that had convinced the Council to underestimate Earth's true capabilities. She felt foolish for doubting Jake's strategy, but also proud that her species had refused to accept defeat. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The Council would never accept this humiliation and would send their entire fleet to destroy humanity completely. Jake knew this and had been preparing for the larger conflict that was now inevitable. Earth had won the first engagement, but the real test was still coming. High Chancellor Vextar of the Galactic Council received the news of the defeat above Earth while reviewing plans for the next phase of galactic expansion. The report seemed impossible because no primitive species had ever successfully resisted Council authority, and certainly no species had ever disabled 3 Council warships without destroying them. Vextar read the report 3 times before accepting that it was accurate. The High Chancellor immediately summoned his military advisors and ordered the mobilization of the largest fleet in Council history. 200 ships representing 12 different species would travel to Earth and demonstrate why resistance to Council authority always ended in complete annihilation. The fleet would arrive within 6 days and would reduce the human home world to radioactive debris as an example to other species who might consider defying Council commands. Captain Ben Walsh commanded humanity's flagship Earth's Fury from the hidden base inside the asteroid Ceres, where the ship had been constructed over the past 8 years. Ben was 44 years old and had been chosen to lead Earth's most powerful vessel. Because of his experience with unconventional warfare tactics, the Earth's Fury was built using hybrid technology that combined the best features of human and alien engineering. Major Kate Anderson led the ground forces that would defend Earth's cities if the Council managed to land troops on the planet's surface. Kate was 31 years old and had trained her soldiers to fight in urban environments against enemies with superior weapons and armor. Her forces included cyber warfare specialists who could deploy Nina Roberts' computer viruses through portable transmission equipment. Dr. Alex Turner had spent the past 5 years studying council psychology and military doctrine to identify weaknesses that human forces could exploit during large-scale combat operations. Alex was 38 years old and had interviewed dozens of alien refugees who had escaped from Council-controlled worlds. His research had revealed that Council commanders became confused and ineffective when faced with tactics they had never encountered before. Admiral Jake Peterson used the 6 days before the Council fleet's arrival to coordinate with hidden allies throughout the galaxy who had been waiting for someone to successfully challenge Council authority. The most important ally was the Kethari, who had been building their own secret fleet for centuries, while pretending to be extinct. The Kethari ships were technologically advanced, and their crews were motivated by generations of hatred for their former oppressors. The revelation of humanity's secret alliance shocked even Jake's closest advisors, who had not known that Earth had been in contact with alien species other than the Council. The Kethari had approached humanity 2 years earlier after learning about the reverse engineering projects that Nina Roberts had been conducting. They had offered to share their advanced technology in exchange for human assistance in their eventual war against the Council. Commander Ryan Brooks had been secretly training with Kethari tactical specialists who had taught him advanced space combat techniques that no human had ever learned. The alien refugees had explained Council fleet formations and command structures that were based on traditions that were thousands of years old. This information had allowed Ryan to develop attack strategies that would exploit the Council's predictable behavior patterns. Captain Amy Davis had been promoted to admiral and now commanded a squadron of 30 ships that had been built specifically for hit-and-run attacks against larger vessels. Amy's ships were faster and more maneuverable than anything in the Council fleet, but they carried less armor and fewer weapons. Her tactics would involve striking quickly at vulnerable targets and disappearing before enemy forces could respond effectively. Dr. Lisa Harper had finally been told about Earth's secret preparations and had spent the past week learning about military plans that had been developed without her knowledge. Lisa felt betrayed by the deception, but she understood why. Jake had kept her uninformed about operations that required absolute secrecy. Her diplomatic work had convinced the Council that humanity posed no serious threat, and this deception had been crucial to Earth's survival. The Council fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system exactly when Jake's intelligence sources had predicted they would. The 200 ships formed a massive formation that could be seen from Earth's surface as a new constellation of moving lights. The fleet included the Council's most powerful battleships and their most experienced commanders who had conquered dozens of worlds during their long careers. High Chancellor Vextar commanded the fleet from his personal flagship, the Infinite Authority, which was the largest and most heavily armed vessel in Council history. Vextar had brought this massive force to ensure that humanity's resistance would be crushed completely, and that no other species would ever consider challenging Council supremacy. He expected the battle to last less than 1 hour. The Council fleet advanced toward Earth in the standard formation that had proven successful in hundreds of previous campaigns. The largest ships formed the center of the formation, while smaller vessels protected the flanks and rear. The commanders were confident that their overwhelming numerical and technological superiority would make victory inevitable, regardless of any tricks the humans might attempt. Admiral Jake Peterson activated Earth's hidden defenses as the enemy fleet crossed the orbit of Mars. Weapon platforms that had been disguised as asteroids powered up their energy cannons, while hidden bases throughout the solar system launched their fighter squadrons. The Council commanders were surprised by the number of human ships that suddenly appeared on their sensors, but they remained confident in their ability to win the battle. The surprise became shock when, Additional ships appeared that were clearly not of human construction. The Cathari fleet emerged from hyperspace behind the Council formation and immediately began attacking the rear guard vessels. The alien refugees had timed their arrival perfectly to create maximum confusion among Council forces who had believed. The Cathari were extinct. High Chancellor Vextar stared at his tactical displays in disbelief as he watched ships that should not exist firing weapons that Council intelligence had never seen before. The Cathari had spent centuries developing new technologies specifically designed to counter Council defenses. Their vessels could penetrate Council shields, and their weapons could destroy Council armor that had been considered invulnerable. Captain Ben Walsh led the Earths, Fury, and 12 other heavy ships in a direct assault on the Council center, while Amy's faster squadrons attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. The human tactics were based on Dr. Turner's research into Council psychology and were designed to create the kind of chaos that alien commanders could not handle effectively. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, because it combined human unpredictability with Cathari, technological superiority, and tactical knowledge gained from centuries of studying Council weaknesses. The Council fleet found itself fighting on multiple fronts against enemies who refused to follow the standard rules of space combat. Major Kate Anderson's ground forces prepared to repel invasion attempts while monitoring the space battle from their command centers on Earth's surface. Kate's soldiers were ready to deploy computer viruses through portable equipment if Council ships managed to penetrate the orbital defenses and attempt planetary landings. The virus programs had been modified to work against Council ground vehicles and personal armor systems. The turning point came when Commander Ryan Brooks led a coordinated attack against the Infinite Authority using techniques he had learned from Cathari instructors. The assault combined physical weapons with cyber warfare in ways that confused the flagship's defensive systems and allowed human and Cathari ships to penetrate the vessel's supposedly impenetrable shields. High Chancellor Vextar found himself trapped on a disabled ship surrounded by enemies he had underestimated completely. The most powerful military leader in galactic history was about to surrender to species he had considered inferior and primitive. The Council's reign of supremacy was ending and a new era was beginning. High Chancellor Vextar stood in the surrender chamber aboard his disabled flagship and faced Admiral Jake Peterson across a table that had been hastily assembled from debris. The most powerful being in the galaxy was about to formally surrender to a species he had dismissed as primitive only days earlier. Vextar's uniform was torn, and his pride was completely shattered, but he was still alive. Because humans had chosen mercy over revenge, the Council fleet had been destroyed or captured during a battle that lasted 8 hours and had changed the balance of power throughout the galaxy forever. Over half of the Council ships had been disabled by computer viruses, while the remainder had been destroyed by combined human and Khon Cathari forces using tactics that no Council commander had ever encountered. The survivors were now prisoners of the alliance they had tried to destroy. Admiral Jake Peterson looked across the table at the alien leader who had ordered the extinction of humanity and felt no satisfaction from his victory. Jake had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, but now that it had arrived, he could only think about the cost of the conflict and the responsibility that came with defeating the galaxy's dominant power. Earth had won its freedom, but it had also inherited the problems that came with galactic leadership. Captain Ben Walsh brought news that the surrender ceremonies were being broadcast throughout known space and that dozens of species were already requesting assistance from the new human Cathari alliance. The galaxy was full of civilizations that had been oppressed by the Council for centuries, and they all wanted freedom from alien domination. Ben could see the burden of these expectations weighing on Jake's shoulders. Dr. Lisa Harper had been appointed As Earth's chief negotiator for the peace talks that would determine the galaxy's future government structure, Lisa had spent years trying to find diplomatic solutions to humanity's problems with the Council, and now she had the opportunity to create a system based on equality rather than domination. The work would be difficult, but it was exactly what she had always hoped to accomplish. Major Kate Anderson reported that Council ground forces on dozens of worlds had surrendered after learning about their leadership's defeat at Earth. Kate's soldiers were being deployed throughout the galaxy to help maintain order during the transition period while new governments were established on formerly oppressed planets. The liberation process would take years, but it had already begun. Admiral Amy Davis led exploration fleets to star systems that the Council had declared forbidden to investigate reports of species that had been hiding from galactic civilization for centuries. Amy's ships were making contact with refugees and survivors who had thought they would never be free from Council persecution. Each new discovery revealed more evidence of the Council's crimes against intelligent life. Dr. Alex Turner was documenting the psychological and cultural damage that the Council had inflicted on hundreds of species during thousands of years of oppressive rule. Alex's research would be used to develop rehabilitation programs for populations that had forgotten how to govern themselves after generations of forced submission. The healing process would be as important as the military victory that had made it possible. Commander Ryan Brooks had been promoted to Admiral and was working with Cathari, commanders to establish the new interspecies defense alliance that would prevent any single power from dominating the galaxy again. Ryan's experience with unconventional warfare made him the ideal person to develop military doctrines that would protect freedom rather than enforce oppression. Nina Roberts was leading teams of human and alien scientists who were studying Council technology to understand how it could be modified for peaceful purposes rather than conquest. Nina's reverse engineering skills were now being used to develop medical equipment and communication systems that would benefit all species rather than just the most powerful ones. The same creativity that had defeated the Council would now help rebuild the galaxy. The peace negotiations took 3 months and resulted in the establishment of the Galactic Democratic Assembly, which gave every intelligent species an equal voice. An interstellar government, regardless of their military strength or technological development. The Assembly's charter was based on principles that Lisa Harper had learned from studying human political evolution, and it guaranteed rights that no galactic government had ever recognized before. Jake Peterson was elected as the first president of the Assembly, despite his reluctance to accept a position that would keep him away from Earth for years at a time. Jake had wanted to return to his home planet and retire from military service, but he understood that the galaxy needed leadership from someone who had proven that freedom was worth fighting for. His acceptance speech was broadcast to billions of beings throughout known space. The new government's first major action was the establishment of the Species Recovery Program, which would help civilizations that had been damaged by Council oppression to rebuild their cultures and technologies. Amy Davis was appointed to lead the program and was given resources to search for survivors of species that the Council had claimed to have destroyed completely. The Cathari revealed that they had been in contact with 12 other supposedly extinct species, who had been hiding in remote star systems while waiting for the Council's eventual downfall. These civilizations emerged from hiding and joined the Assembly as full members with the knowledge and technologies they had preserved during centuries of exile. The galaxy was much more diverse than anyone had realized. High Chancellor Vexstar was tried for crimes against intelligent life and was sentenced to spend the remainder of his natural lifespan working to repair the damage his government had caused. The former dictator would help establish schools and hospitals on worlds that the Council had exploited for resources while their populations lived in poverty. Justice would be served through redemption rather than revenge. The transformation of galactic civilization took decades, But it began with humanity's refusal to accept defeat when faced with impossible odds. Earth's victory had proven that technological superiority could be overcome by determination and creativity, and that oppressed peoples could find freedom if they were willing to fight for it. The galaxy learned that strength came from diversity rather than conformity. Lisa Harper established the first truly democratic interstellar government in galactic history and wrote a constitution that protected the rights of species that had never been considered worthy of protection. Her diplomatic skills had finally found their proper purpose in creating systems that served all intelligent life rather than just the most powerful civilizations. Amy Davis discovered evidence of ancient civilizations that had existed before the Council's rise to power and had possessed technologies that were more advanced than anything the modern galaxy had seen. These archaeological findings suggested that the Council had not been the first galactic empire and would not be the last unless the new democratic system could prevent future tyrannies from emerging. The epilogue of humanity's victory was written not in military reports, but in the stories of liberated peoples who could finally determine their own destinies without fear of alien oppression. Children were born free on worlds where their parents had lived as slaves, and new civilizations began to flourish in star systems that had been stripped of resources by Council exploitation.